You know what we haven't talked about in a long time? Salespeople. Today, I want to talk about things that salespeople don't want to hear. That's a topic for today's video. Let's get started. And the way usually things work on a vendor side at least is you have a client who is requesting the work and there are people who are doing the actual work, right? You have a production people and you have a client. And they are kind of on the opposite sides if you want to think of it. Now, when production team, they have people who are going to back them up, right? They're project managers, technical people, people who manage production, and then you have a client on the other side. Well, where does a salesperson come in? And you would think the salesperson would be on the side of production and they would be sort of defending the company, but they usually are on a client side. And so whenever something happens, salesperson is the one who's going to take client side and is going to start saying, well, why is this like that? Why is it like that? And they start getting all angry, even though they may not have all the information and they don't know anything that happened. They just kind of jump to conclusions and they immediately take the client side. So that's kind of the long introduction why, some of the things we're going to talk about today happen. Let's get into it without any more delays. The first accusation you're going to get from salespeople is, how come you didn't respond to that email? How come you're not on top of your emails? You should be monitoring, you should be this. But then you actually see that they're not responding to their emails too. And you could say, well, you haven't responded to that also. The client has asked you for a change to an RFP and you haven't responded for 4 hours. And then you had to go, oh, oops, I'm really sorry. I was at my kid's soccer game, some kind of lame excuse. Right, you clearly missed an email. So they really don't like to be pointed out when they miss an email. They do like to point out when you miss an email. But then they like to take things further and say things like, how come you didn't respond to this client? This client is so important. This is a super important client. They're supporting our whole company. They're responsible for majority of our income or something like that. They're going to come up with a reason why this client is super important and you should have responded to that email specifically if you didn't respond to anything else. Well, what salespeople don't want to hear is, we don't actually care. We don't separate out the clients by how much business they bring, how much money, any of that. If I'm going to respond to emails, I'm going to either respond to all the emails, or if I'm going to be in a meeting or not doing something, then I may not respond to any of them. But we're not going to be like, oh, let me skip these emails but respond to that one, right? Not going to happen. All the clients are the same. In fact, in production team's eyes, all the clients are the same. And the ones that they would most likely to respond are clients who are nicer, not the ones who bring more work or things like that. So don't say like, oh, this is the biggest client, you should have responded. We don't look at clients that way, and we really don't care. In the same way, they like to pick out one client who, probably their client, and they say, you should do more QC on projects for that particular client. No, we're not going to do more QC for a specific client. That's not how it works. We're either going to have QC procedures or we're going to have something like that, and we're going to apply them all evenly for everybody. There is no one client that gets extra QC. There is a tiny exception here though, is if you screwed something up. Let's say there was a production that went out and it was messed up and then we had to redo it and it was messed up again and there are, problems. And sometimes you get those projects where like everything is going wrong, right? Like every problem that could happen just starts happening. So in that case, you could employ like a strategy where, let's say an analyst runs a production and then you go give it to the second analyst and they're going to look over everything and then you give it to another project manager to re-QC it, some kind of thing like that when project is just cursed and there's a problem of the problem of the problem. But unless you have that happening, there is no special QC treatment for your precious client. Everyone gets the same checklist. And speaking more on QC, salespeople like to point out if a problem is found. How come this thing wasn't on QC checklist? How come this wasn't QC'd for? Well, because you cannot QC for everything. It's just simply impossible. There are going to be human factors, there are going to be software bugs, there are going to be all kinds of issues. And it is impossible to check every little thing. There are going to be problems, and if you're going to try to log every problem, put it on the QC checklist, that QC checklist will get out of hand, and then you're going to have a different problem. You're going to say, How come these productions aren't going out? Well, because somebody's spending 3 hours and going through a QC checklist of every single thing, right? That's impossible. So QCing every single possible thing that could go wrong is just impossible. And for the last part that salespeople don't like to hear is that we will give clients deadlines as well. Now, this is not frequently done, and often it's much more subtle than the other way around. But if the client says, okay, we want to produce documents at Friday at 5 p.m. Well, a good project manager will turn around and say, good, we will do that. Here is your cutoff time to give us a tag to produce. If you want this production to go out Friday 5 p.m., then you have to stop reviewing, let's say Thursday 5 p.m., whatever your company policies are. So if there is a delay in client's review, then there could be delay on the production, and that could be explained to a client like, hey, you either have to stop where you are, we'll take a subset, or if you're going to continue to review further, then that's going to push your production delivery date further back. That's what good project managers do. They manage clients and they tell them when they need to stop and what they need to do. And it's probably not the best thing for salespeople to hear when you turn your deadlines around and you send them on your client. But if you want things to be done smoothly and on time, you have to establish that way of communicating where client would stop work and they know when they need to give things to us so that we could do our job. And that also earns a little bit more respect to a production team, in my opinion, where we say like, hey, if you want this done, you want this quality, you want us to take our time and do quality control and check all the images and fix all the cutoffs and do all the things, we need time. And so we want to demand that time from a client, and that again gives us a little bit more respect to what we do. So let me know if I make any sense or if I'm completely off on this topic here. If you have things that that salespeople don't want to hear, put them in the comment section below. Don't forget to follow on LinkedIn, subscribe on YouTube, and I will see you on another video.